I think we should get started now. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Joseph Attig, the Executive Chairman of ID4Africa, and I'm very happy to welcome you all to the third part of our webinar series on the impact of COVID on identity management. In this part, we have actually a special session with a unique format. We are going to have two sections or two sessions, one after the other. One will consist of a panel discussion, and the other will consist of a series of rapid fire presentations. The first panel is going to be focused on the question of how identity management can help countries start their economies and reopen their skies. We have representatives of some illustrious companies who are involved in this space who can speak to this particular thematic. In the second session, which will immediately begin after the end of this session, we will be examining the question of contactless innovations, which came out as an important requirement for continuity of operations of the identity management authorities. Today, what we are going to do in these two sessions is we are going to let you, the attendees, have direct access in terms of the questions. So don't hesitate. When I say please ask questions, either they are directed to explaining what the speaker has just said, or you can ask general questions to animate the discussion. So I'll explain at that time when each type of question would be solicited. So without any further delay, I am happy to begin session number one, and I will begin that session by asking the panelists in the order that I will cite to present themselves and say a few words about how their organization is responding to COVID and how what their organization is doing can help countries address these two thematics that we talked about, restarting their economies and reopening their skies. At that point in time, I encourage the audience, if you have any clarification questions, to ask them of the speaker. I'll allow 1 or 2 minutes just at that point in time. Otherwise, you can ask general questions to the panel of experts. So we will start the session by welcoming Shashi from Mastercard. Could you please present yourself?
Hi, Joseph. It's a real honor to be here on this panel, and thank you for inviting me and Mastercard to be part of this panel. Well, my name is Shashi Raghunandan, and I work at Mastercard, and I lead the product development efforts for the humanitarian and development team. Now, as most of you know, Mastercard is a technology company in the payments business. Our job is to connect governments, merchants, financial institutions around the world to enable them to make electronic forms of payment. To Joseph's point on our response on COVID, broadly, I think the thrust of our focus as Mastercard has definitely been on reopening the economy and reopening the skies as well. Broadly, our response has been focused on 3 buckets, which is the area of philanthropy, the area of data science, and the area of technology. On an overall basis, I think Mastercard is committed to helping governments reopen their economies and has committed up to about $300 million in doing so. Our initiatives are focused in the philanthropy space in working with the Gates Foundation and with Wellcome in the acceleration and deployment of vaccines. In the area of technology, it has spent a significant amount in the next 5 years to help small businesses use our technology to kind of become more resilient in terms of cybersecurity threats. And in the area of data science is where I think there's a little bit more work that we've done in terms of helping governments reopen skies and reopening the economies, because as Mastercard, we do tend to see a lot of data come through the systems, and we're able to gauge the uptick, if you will, of the economic activity at a broad level. So helping governments understand the flow of that, the purchase behavior, the cross-border, and how kind of to help open the skies. So at a very high level, I think Mastercard has been focused, on this effort on kind of helping governments reopen the skies, and has committed extensively to this cause. I'll pause there now. Thanks, Joseph.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are any questions, I don't see any questions coming out on the Q&A session, so we'll go to the next one. Joe from Thales.
Thank you, Joseph. I'm very honored to be part of this webinar together with all these prestigious panelists. Hello, everyone. My name is Jaume Dubois. I'm in charge of the Thales Unique Identity Offer for Civil Identity Solution. I'm also a member of Secure Identity Alliance, which I'm also representing today, and I'm notably one of the founding members at the origin of OSIA, the interoperable API for identity system. In my background, I've been deploying identity system for 10 years in Africa and Latin America. I will now introduce you my company and highlight some solutions that we have for government to overpass this mondial crisis. In Thales, we have always been a trusted partner of governments in various domains. We are working on security, aerospace, space. We talk about opening the sky with good for it, transport, and also in cybersecurity and digital security. Last year, Thales has acquired Gemalto, and so we are now a leader in civil and digital identity, in security and biometrics. We work with government, we work with telcos, banks, and also other private sector companies. If now we come on the topic, we provide digital identity solutions that can serve the COVID-19 and post-COVID-19 period, like, for example, facial recognition solution or mobile-based digital identity, also known as a digital ID wallet. Those solutions which are allowing to avoid the contact with public device. So you don't have to touch things in public areas, or you use your own device. On border and travel solution, we help the passenger to have a safe journey in the airport by having also this kind of touchless solution like the e-gates we have in Paris. What I would like to address in this webinar, if I'm improving the IGN management in nowadays, and if it is important to have more resilience of administration and economy, there is something that now the countries must have. It's to know and acknowledge the existence of individuals by registering their whole population. By registering their population, country will be able to plan their social policies. And the usage of biometrics will ensure at the same time the unicity of those identities. It will allow the identity verification, and finally will constitute a proof of presence and liveness, which are all important for efficient and also for optimized social management. But we need to be careful. If digital technology can bring more convenience and empower the population, it's crucial to make sure they won't be excluding people. Those who don't have access to technologies or infrastructure will be then out of the game. And this situation may be, unfortunately, occurring often in the developing countries. So Thales is always taking care to propose the right solution for the right usage, which is corresponding to person context and also to their needs. Finally, I would say we have a complete set of solutions for registration, for management, and for usage of identities that we will adapt to the population, to their diversity, to their context of use, from the registration to the management, issuing ID numbers, issuing cards, using digital solution. I will finish by saying that we, Thales and SIA that I'm representing today, want to be the long-term partner of government to help them to build solutions.
Okay, thanks for that general statement. There is no specific question addressed to you at this point in time. I'll move on to Leslie Ann from AID.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invite, Joseph. I work at a company called AID, AI in ID it stands for, and we work with last mile innovators to deliver privacy protecting interoperable identity solutions via touchless biometrics for anyone, anywhere, online and offline. So as part of our COVID response, we've been looking for ways that we can support those innovating in the last mile to get economies moving again. And the easiest way to explain the kind of thing we're doing is to tell you the story of a ground partner that we have. There's a company in East Africa called Shujaz. It's East Africa's biggest youth brand. It engages daily with 56% of young Kenyans, 24% of young Tanzanians, aged about 16 to 24. Their mission is to connect young people with the information, skills, resources they need to take control of their future. And they've been long focused on the realities that the community that they talk to are suffering from, not just lack of employment, but lack of work. And this is pre-COVID. So things have clearly got a lot worse in the last few weeks. They're harnessing partnerships, even pre-COVID, with enterprises. So for example, they've got a Heroes for Change program. They have a community ambassador program where they run hand washing education events. And this has been happening for the last few years. So they have ambitions to go more digital than they have. They run radio shows and they have Facebook, Twitter, all kinds of things, but they really want to harness the digital potential of this community. They are accelerating those visions in the light of the COVID realities, and they want to harness that existing trove of information about that community to create a conduit to the formal sector, to a trustworthy community that wants to work. So what we're doing at AID is providing touchless, interoperable biometric toolkits and deduplication services that allow Shujaz to create a verified community of real people digitally in the informal sector in a way that doesn't store sensitive biometric information. Over time, this will create new alternative sources of information in a privacy-enhancing manner, verifiable by the community, that can be used in the future to provide enhanced levels of assurance that hopefully will allow that community to empower their own economic growth. And by creating that digital footprint in a privacy-protecting, interoperable manner, there is the potential to measure impact over time, which is unheard of in last-mile rural economies. So I've been working in Africa financial services transformation since 2005. I was involved in technology behind groundbreaking innovations like M-Pesa, M-Shwari, Lipa na M-Pesa. If you work in East Africa, they're household names these days. And services also like M-Kopa Solar, how do we get light to people via digital services?
I think we may have lost Leslie Ann's audio.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you're back.
I'm back? Okay.
Yes.
I'm not sure what you missed. I think mostly I've said what I was going to say, that I think I've come from financial services, but I think money and identity and restoring the economy are all interlinked. And many of the insights that I will reflect back in this pilot come from my ground experience in financial inclusion service design.
Okay.
Thank you, Joseph.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we move on. Lionel Famoko.
Thank you, Joseph. So thank you very much for having me and Famoko here on the panel. So my name is Lionel Baraban, and I'm a co-founder and CEO of Famoko. So first of all, Famoko is not a, it's a scale-up. So it's a, I don't know if you know what a scale-up. Not sure I know myself. It sounds like a big startup. And we are present in Africa since 2010. And we are present in around 40 countries in Africa. Our job at Famoko is to validate digital transactions, any type of digital transactions. And for Famoko, a transaction can be payment, but can be also identity management, KYC, delivery, and so on. So it's a secure exchange of data. And we do that with Android devices, and we do that with a lot of data sovereignty. So we put a lot of attention of data sovereignty. Now, what are we doing for COVID? Historically, Famoko is working with the UN to digitalize humanitarian vouchers. The UN started 5 or 6 years ago to digitalize entirely the way they provide help and they fight for hunger by providing sort of an ID card, UN ID card, which is a biometric ID card, on which you can push a voucher. So it's a way to give money with usage restrictions. So I give you $100, but I write inside the money that the money will be used only for food and for that type of food only in those villages and only for the next 3 weeks. So Famoko is doing that for the past few years. We have around 25 million users, and altogether we should push around $1 billion in terms of value transactions. So now in the COVID crisis, the safety net, social safety net asked by several governments become more and more crucial. We see the level of poverty increasing all over, and the need for such solution to be able to push vouchers for food, but also for masks, for vaccines, for health. It's something which is all over Africa today, unfortunately. The second thing we do at Famoko for the crisis is the digital care management. And what we see, a lot of governments are asking today a simple way to track people where they come back in the country. It's a very concrete solution where people are coming back to a country, they will be tested, and then you will need to find a way to follow them, to know where they are, and if they happen to be sick, to be able to track where they've been, who they met with, and so on. So this is the second solution we are providing. The third solution we are providing for the COVID crisis is around payment, and we've all seen that digital payment are increasing. And for us, digital payment is obviously all the mobile money solution. You just mentioned M-Pesa, Orange Money, Airtel, Tigo. They all have their own solution. The question of the interoperability of all the solutions are crucial. And we see also a solution like M-Visa or MasterPass coming on the ground, or a contactless payment solution coming on the ground. And also, like in Ghana, biometric payment solution coming. All the three answers are today requested by some government to increase their digitalization. And the last thing I'd like to add is we see a big trend of digitalization, social safety net, payment, identity management, and all the data which is created by this big trend of digitalization. We are creating a huge amount of data, and the question is to whom that data really belong. Does it belong to China? Does it belong to Google or Apple, or does it belong to African people? So data sovereignty, when you have a huge trend of digitalization, is definitely one of the key element of the moment.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Lionel. Actually, along the same lines, we are going to move to Harm from iLabs.
Hi, you can hear me well?
Yes.
And it's an honor to be on this panel, and I think it's timely because we are all stuck with the lockdown of COVID-19, and digital might be our escape. So my name is Harm Jan Aansworst. I'm based in the Netherlands. I'm the CEO and founder of iLabs Technologies and also the Chief Strategy Officer of Okudu. So I joined forces last year with my good friend in Dubai, Mohamed Fagheri, who is the founder and CEO of Okudu. And we decided that it's time now to build a trustworthy Internet of Everything for the well-being of our people and planets, between organizations, devices, and people. So I remember last trip we did was actually to Accra, and focusing on the unbanked challenge. And we strongly believe that with digital identity and biometrics, we can start solving that, and it needs more than just one company. So this is our call for collaboration and a coalition of the willing. So I love to travel, but I'm now stuck for the last 3 months already. And we joined the European Commission hackathon, EU versus virus. And we were one of the 30,000 people that joined, but our project Open Gates was selected as one of the top 30 most impactful projects because it can save lives on a short time frame, especially when we try to reopen the skies and open our economies again for tourism and travel and business. So our aim is to build touchless traveling with biometrics and also proof of your biometric with location information associated. And also enable privacy, sharing of your sensitive and personal data with the relationships that you allow and giving consent to. So during the hackathon, we got commitments from a couple of partners that we were excited to have. First, Tech5 on biometric verification, SAS, the advanced analytics company for scalable artificial intelligence and analytics platform, and also Mastercard. Good to see Mastercard in this panel as well, but it's part of Mastercard focusing on the digital inclusion and financial inclusion objectives with biometrics, and to ensure that there are no biometric templates stored or shared. So we did already a proof of concept during the hackathon in Sudan for repatriation, and it's well needed. We are building a larger, more impactful program to fight COVID-19 in Sudan and to speed the digital transformation. So Okudu actually is the meaning from the Zulu language, meaning truth, and the very one. So it's relevant to build a trustworthy digital future for ourselves and for the continent. And Okudu is one of the identity service providers based in the Middle East and Africa, with developers in Thailand and all over the world. And our focus is on reducing the inequality. I started iLabs and joined Okudu after leaving Verizon, and that I was leading identity and IoT security for the last 9 years. Because in the next decade, we want to create more impact with new types of partnerships and collaboration in public-private sector. So I joined the Institute Future of Living and helped with the roadmap for smart cities and smart nations, published in Curacao last year. And also I co-wrote the secure authentication paper presented in Cairo with the ITU and the World Bank ID4D program. I'm part of AIOTI, that's the European Commission Public-Private Partnerships, and co-leading the security of IoT. I'm part of ETSI, a standardization organization for the secure and leading the security, privacy, and interoperability tracks on that. And just recently, and also relevant for our panel discussion later on, COVID-19 contact tracing interoperability on a global level. So my focus now is to reopen the skies as quickly as possible, and that needs collaboration, so stronger together. So this is a call out, and also we are open for any kind of partnership, support, and grants and funding. So looking forward to the discussion as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Imad from CETA.
Okay, thank you, Joseph, and thank you for the invitation. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Imad Mohanna, and I'm the Vice President responsible for the government sector in CETA in the Middle East, the Indian subcontinent, and Africa. I would like to start by introducing CETA. We are the world's largest provider of communication and information technology for the air transport industry. We are 100% owned and focused on the air transport industry. We can proudly say that every single passenger flight relies on our technology one way or another. If you ever traveled, you've been to an airport, you must have used CETA's technology, most probably without knowing it. So facilitating the movement of people and cargo has been core to us for the past 70 years. But most recently, in the last couple of decades, we have been focused also on helping governments secure their borders, whether these are air borders, land, or sea. And that gives us a lot of experience in that field. I would like to talk a little bit about COVID-19. It has obviously sent shockwaves across the travel and tourism industry. For the first time in history, when going back as early as when commercial transportation started, for the first time, we have seen the commercial aviation sector comes to a complete halt around mid-March. Obviously, this is unprecedented. Our own data at CETA, for example, shows that in the month of May, the flight volumes around the world dropped by 80% year over year. On June 12, IATA has issued their revised forecast, stating that the global airline industry are poised actually to lose a record of $84 billion this year. To put this into perspective, this is more than 3 times as big as the losses that happened during the global financial crisis. So it's also unprecedented in that sense. So therefore, we are facing the biggest challenge in commercial aviation history. How do we restart the industry that has come to a complete halt across borders, across countries, while ensuring that we don't become the source of the next infection or the source of the next wave, as they call it, or the resurgence of the disease? Looking at that angle, IATA and Airport Councils International, or ACI, have put their effort together and identified a roadmap to what they call safely restarting the aviation industry. They have published a white paper. I will touch on their approach whenever possible in this esteemed panel. I would like to end by saying, in today's world, and even prior to COVID-19, we have seen many governments starting to adopt a layered approach to border management or border security, pushing as much as possible of the data collection and risk assessment on passengers as much forward as possible. So, starting with when a person applies for a visa or e-visa, to when a person books their ticket, to when the passenger actually checks in, whether at home or in the airport, or when the passenger arrives at border control, again, whether this is a manned station or an automated border control. What we believe is needed now for this post-COVID era is integrating health checks into this process, whether this in the form of electronic health declaration, e-landing card, health passport, immunity passports, what have you, needs to be included in this process, and hopefully as early as possible as well, 72 hours in advance of departure. We're already seeing this happening across those countries that have elected to open up their border, and we hope that it would become what is adopted across the rest of the world. With this, I'm going to come back to you, Joseph. Thank you.
Thank you. We've lost one of the panelists from Ernst & Young, Koshi. I think we should proceed while we're trying to reconnect him back. I encourage the attendees to ask any general questions right now of this illustrious panel. As you know, they represent really diverse skill sets. While you're thinking about your questions, I want to go back to the panel and ask some market intelligence. Just get a quick sense of what you are hearing in terms of the top 2 to 3 capabilities or solutions that your customers or market is asking you for. We want to see if there is any convergence of those. So we're going to do a little poll and understand what is the market asking you for right now. 2 to 3 things, top things. We'll start with Shashi.
Thanks, Joseph. I think in terms of what we are hearing and seeing, there are 3 broad buckets. The first, I would say, is definitely in the area of social disbursements. Now, as governments are trying to recover and are trying to kind of get their economies back on track, trying to get the unemployed back into employment, the gap between the current and unemployment status and that period of time has to be met through certain grants, etc. And the ability to reach individuals who are impacted by COVID is of immediate and is really a burning platform. So we're hearing a lot about trying to help governments disperse that money, get people back, and get people back and going. That's the first bucket. I think the second broad bucket, I would say, is in the area of data. Now, I did touch upon this in my initial comments. We are hearing a lot about as governments are now trying to recover from this COVID experience, the priority has moved from trying to kind of respond to something, but to really recover from something requires investments in things like tourism and cross-border and things that power a lot of these economies. So, understanding the broad trend in consumer spending, the broad trend in kind of cross-border travel, how that is shaping and what governments can do to incentivize people to come back and spend in the economies is of critical importance. So that's the second bucket I would kind of highlight. The third, I would say, is a little bit more generic. I think, broadly in the area of, assistance of sort of public-private partnerships, I would say, in helping governments respond. So there are a wide variety of challenges that this emergency has posed, right from challenges related to vaccine delivery and the like. So governments are looking at a broad spectrum of public and private partnerships to be able to solve some of that. We have personally within Mastercard, I think, looked at philanthropy as a way to kind of respond to that by providing governments and public institutions the funding that they require to accelerate some of that development. So that's the third bucket. So in general, I'd break it up into three. One is the social disbursement and payments. The second is around data and helping restart economies and reopen skies. And the third is in the area of philanthropy and public-private partnerships.
I mean, Shashi, these are foundational in terms of their importance. I mean, we're not talking about point solutions here. We're talking about reforms of government practices. Do you see that as a real trend that the governments are committed to, or is this a knee-jerk reaction?
Well, let me break that up into two parts, Joseph. I think I would say governments that have invested in that infrastructure at the start, we are finding that they are better able to respond to these situations because the infrastructure is in place. So in the case of the ability to, for example, use the payments infrastructure or to use data, I think that capacity and capability and infrastructure, if it's in place, then the response is definitely in terms of doubling down on that effort. There are governments, as we are all aware, that are kind of not that advanced in that kind of deployment. I think I would classify them and say that broadly, the urgency of the matter has sunk in. And I think what we are hearing now is the commitment to make that reform. Now, of course, it's a matter of whether that reform really goes through. But you're right, talking about infrastructural issues. And so this is likely to take some more time. But we are here in standing partnership to be able to help deliver upon that change.
Okay, thank you. John?
Yes, thank you, Joseph. I would like to highlight also one point, one priority for our customer on Thales. There are this large plan organized by World Bank and the development organization about building database of identity, proposing digital identity, with all these problems that I mentioned in my introduction of governance, being able to know the people, to deliver them ads. As said, Shashi also deliver maybe cash transfer facilities, and being able to build such an infrastructure in an ecosystem finally of system doing ad, system getting access to banking, getting access to smartphones and communication is important to enter the whole population inside this digital world, this digital game. And so it's important to have this inclusion. And also something very important is that the state is going to build the foundation of an infrastructure of transaction in between people, states, and also services provider. And the access to this infrastructure is very important to be interoperable. interoperability will be the key for a service provider to enter easily inside this infrastructure. And it's very important that, and that will be maybe a part of my conclusion, but it's very important that all the players, the private sector player, all the development agencies work together on building this interoperability, because it's now with the COVID an emergency for countries. We see some of our customers that regret to don't have started before the registration of their population and the delivery of services. So we are, as I said, we are funding OSIA with a couple of colleagues that will be also in this panel. Famoco is one, hello Lionel. And so we are really working very hard to establish this interoperability so that the government be able to count on various partners from the ID industry with the experience, with the necessary experience that are able to work together.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just for the attendees who are asking questions, after we go through this first round, we're going to go through some specific questions that you're asking. So hang in there and continue to ask questions, no problem. So great, we understand now your customers are basically saying, I want to know my people and I want to be able to reach them in order to deliver assistance in an inclusive and fair manner. Okay, we're going to continue. Leslie Ann.
So I would add in that because our technology is powered by Trust Stamp, what we're seeing as an industry
Leslie, we have lost you.
Oh.
So repeat, because our technology is powered by Trust, come back to that.
Okay, hopefully it's a bit more stable here. My UK internet connection is not so good. What can I say? So because we're powered by Trust Stamp, we work quite a lot on fraud prevention using biometric techniques. And so I think we can see in trends the need for deduplication services. We can see the need for account takeover, fraud detection, those kind of services. And that's kind of where we're seeing a lot of activity in terms of what's going on in terms of our main sales pipeline. We're also seeing the need for sharing of data safely. It's becoming far bigger conversation that right now we're trying to find people like crazy, but what we really need to do is figure out a more robust, privacy enhanced way to share data robustly and therefore deduplicate robustly. And I think that's where we're seeing customers kind of in that kind of conversation.
Okay. All right, let's keep going. Let's speed up the rhythm if we can. Lionel?
Yes. Yes, I don't want to repeat to what Shashi just said, or Leslie Ann, or Jerome. I agree. I think that the tracking, social safety net, disbursement are the three things that we see as our requests from all the governments, and with data privacy and so on. But I'd like to say something else. I think that the need today is speed of deployment. What I'm hearing is not, I want to build a huge program for the next 10 years. What I'm hearing is, what can you do in the next 6 months? What can you do tomorrow? How can I send money now? What do you have that we can deploy in the next 3 weeks? And this emergency, our ability to answer to emergency requests, I think that's what will define us as an industry in the next in the next few weeks. And we cannot say that today we do business as usual. We are answering to an unheard of, unseen crisis, and the level of emergency and that we see from our partner is really huge. So I think that the ease of deployment, the rapidity of deployment, and the price of deployment are definitely what they are looking first now.
Okay, great. Let's keep going quickly. Harm.
Yes, so I think one thing that we learned is that it's not just a country or island level of impact. This is a global impact, and we need to think and act now global as well to respond. So health and health data status sharing across the borders and across the world is learning us that we need to standardize, that we need to have frameworks for interoperability and certification to, or at least testing and self-asserting that you have the same data structures and naming it in the same way. And so I've seen hackathon now in the Netherlands and many other countries for contact tracing, and they approach the problem with a local perspective. And I think we now understand better that this is not working. So we need to have a more continental or even global perspective and approach, and also programs. So when we say the sustainable development goal for the next 10 years, we don't have that luxury. You know, it's not needed anymore because we have all the tools that's needed. All the technologies are there. I would focus on the user-centric approach with decentralized identities and biometric. People are who they are, and they can prove easily. So now we can just be in a global digital trustworthy ecosystem.
Very, very interesting point. I mean, we had that debate regarding legal and digital. Now that debate is a moot point as far as I'm concerned. I think we know what we need. It's not legal identity by 2030. We need digital identity tomorrow.
Yeah, excellent. And we have it already. So now let's do it. Yeah.
Let's do it. Ahmad.
Okay, well, I'm just going to be, as you asked, quick, and I will focus only, obviously, on the travel industry. So what we're seeing now is the whole, if you want, concept of touchless, contactless is becoming ever more important. So, you know that airports and airlines have invested in kiosks and automated gates for boarding and for border control, but all of this is based on touching, and that needs to go away. So using a combination of biometrics and mobile solutions to either complement or replace the existing infrastructure. So that's a trend that we're seeing very strongly in the market. The other one I touched on during my opening, the health check, the ability to gather information about the health of the passenger, and in order to complement the risk assessment process, and do this as early as possible, either as part of an automated authorization to travel or as part of the visa or as a standalone, but not to push it on airlines, to do it through the government. Okay. And we at CETA have started in that field with an offering that we call Health ETA. The last but not least is also social distancing, because it's here to stay, and in airports as well. So the proper use of analytics to plan resources around social distancing and plan the movement of people.
Excellent. Very interesting. Koshi, we're bringing you back. Can you just basically try to introduce yourself within the context of what you're hearing the government are?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had dropped out, so I'll have to sort of contextualize what I was planning to say then and what is going to say now, and so that it doesn't create a disruption. My name is Koshi. I'm a senior partner at Ernst & Young, as we call EY. And being a consulting firm, we have been doing a number of programs all across the world in the area of economic development, as well as social security. And so what I'm going to focus, because we are talking about ID and social security and its, ID and its impact on social security, I'm going to contextualize from that point of view. When we look at the social protection program, there are three key components. First is uniquely identifying the beneficiary, and that's what we try to do, the ID program. We as a firm have been involved in this program for more than 10, 12 years and been the pioneer in India in the largest digital ID program, and which has been successfully implemented for 1.2 billion people. So in the second component, as our colleague who has been just, the fellow has just talked about, is the fund transfer. Here again, I want to just talk about one very, very interesting futuristic solution that has come in India. That we are building a foundation for, building on this foundation of digital ID. We have introduced what we call unified payment interface, which is completely open, interoperable protocol that has transformed the payment systems. If I just give you a quick stat, UPI now handles 5 times the volumes of transaction handled by the normal credit card world. And that's a kind of explosion of, financial inclusion that has been made possible, which is something like 1.5 billion transactions in a month. We are in the process of building the next layer on the top of it to provide a digital voucher using a completely open protocol. You know, because we are hearing a lot about, you know, what we are all collectively doing in countries are doing in this pandemic situation. But we have also learned one thing: we cannot be only short-termish. We have to think long-term and build a solid foundation. ID is only a beginning, but we have to build on and around ID to make more powerful solution that can handle that's ready for the world tomorrow. And that's where I want to introduce a third element, which is what I want to just highlight for the next couple of minutes. It's about the market and including the supply chain, because it's still a challenge. That's why if you look at the governments are forced to run the whole physical operation of procurement, supply chain management, and retail shops in many of the countries, and often very, very inefficiently. And we have been discussing at many of the, you know, the senior government bureaucracy, the bureaucracies and the leaders, and they're saying that we need to think about completely changing the market. And that's where we are working along with Beacon Foundation, which is established by Nandan Nilekani, who has come out with a brilliant solution. You know, it has now published an open protocol specification which can be completely revolutionize the marketplace. So what is the challenge that it is attempting to solve? You know, digital marketplace is a big boon, but markets are still heavily siloed. So it is increasingly becoming walled gardens of few players. So this is a challenge, whether it is in retail or whether it is in health service delivery or whether this is in mobility. You know, so what we are trying to do is to have a completely different, you know, solution for this. You know, because today, even for the service provider, unless you're a part of an aggregator platform, you have a big advantage in terms of, you know, discoverability. So this backend solution is, you know, is a complete new way of looking at the market. A simple adapter based on written protocol can provide a service provider equal access across the market, whether he's big or small. Yeah. So what I'm just sort of, just one more line and just you know, the beauty of the solution is that we are talking about we are not talking about huge investment or a new platform. We are talking about that can be a service providers can at very low cost plugging into the market. We are democratizing in the market just like HTTP democratized the internet. And it's going to be launched. It's not a very, very futuristic. We are launching the first solution in the coming month. And we expect that many more on the way in the next few you know, months, changing the whole market scenario. Sorry, sorry for butting in between. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. I want to take some questions now. We have a long line of questions. I want to try to combine a few of them. One particular theme which came in questions, but also we heard in other seminars the last couple of weeks, was the question of whether we have been seeing that the priority is not fraud prevention, but actually access and inclusion. As a result, there is a sense, for example, that the authentication protocols and the verification protocols have been relaxed. The African authorities have said, we're not actually using biometric authentication to authenticate people. The banks are removing their one-time passwords when accessing mobile internet banking during the COVID pandemic. They're allowing higher limits on transactions. So the issue here, are we seeing, and I want Shashi's perspective, because, and Shashi and Lionel perhaps, because you're coming from that sector. Are we seeing the big institutions realizing that the pain that people are going through, the last thing we want to do is reject them? So are they erring on the side of allowing fraud to be happening in the interest of inclusion, or what's your dynamic as you see it?
Thanks, Joseph. I think it's a fascinating question. There is, to another panelist's point of view, there is this immediate reaction of trying to increase access to services, but to be balanced out by the long-term view of reducing fraud in the ecosystem. So, you know, in the short term, we are definitely seeing that. That is going to happen as we try to reach the last mile, try to reach them in a time-critical manner. But that is not to say that people haven't already woken up to the fact that as they do that, the risk of fraud and cybersecurity threats do go up. So our commitment to that is to actually up the ante in the long-term investments, even as we realize these short-term things are happening. is to invest and double down on our cybersecurity, investments and products and deployments, and even our efforts to provide them for free to small and medium scale enterprises. So there's sensitivity built up around the criticality of that function, because you can do this in the short term, but it is going to lead to a long-term issue. So to your point, I think we are seeing it. It is a reality, but our response to that is to actually double down on that. We have personally, as Mastercard, I think committed about $250 million over the next 5 years to help small and medium scale enterprises actually double down on cybersecurity and to make them understand the sensitivity of that.
Okay, so inclusion is important, but we're not going to leave the door open and encourage another problem that's going to be a catastrophe where fraud is going to be rampant.
Absolutely. And the other thing I would just add is that the scale of fraud and the way that this is kind of detected is through the outreach of a global network, which we kind of help provide. So the algorithms and the kind of back end of it runs a lot on cases that are generated and the number of issues that we see. So a global network definitely helps mitigate that, to I think another panelist's point on that point.
Okay, Lionel, do you have anything to add to that, or can I move?
Just very quickly, just 2 words. What we see with our customer is they keep increasing the security of the systemic fraud and systemic problems. So they don't want to see their system down or something like that. But what they are decreasing a little bit is the local fraud. So if someone is just stealing on a local base, it's today less the focus now. So I think we see a balanced approach where they're increasing the cybersecurity, the systemic approach, and they are decreasing the security on the local.
The individual.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, excellent. I want to target Harm and Imad in a question that seems to be recurring, and it has to do, you both spoke about the need for adding health data to ID data. And the issue here that has been asked, how to plan to standardize the sharing of medical data. How do we go about building a standard medical data platform? Are we anywhere near? I mean, we understand now identity, there are standards about it. How about sharing medical data? Is there any standard underway?
Yeah, I can go first. I already mentioned that I'm part of the contact tracing standardization of ETSI and more than 35 global organizations working on this sharing and interoperability of data across borders, and including the health data. And what we see is the current and existing standards are being used for today. So that's related to OpenID Connect and other existing standards for federation and assertions of data between different organizations and countries. And we see a more focus now on standardization of decentralized identities and sharing verifiable credentials. So that's a more personal and individual control of your identity. And I believe on the long run, that will be the benefit, the winning structure. But so we will be living in a transitioning time of different standards and interoperability. So we need to ensure that we have solutions today that work and that scale, and also that we improve our architecture when the technology is there.
Okay, Imad, can you add, please?
Yeah, I can add by saying, first of all, the first obstacle, if you want, around standardization is that the jurisdiction for health information is actually in the countries is with health authorities or ministries of health and so on, which is a different jurisdiction than the identity. So having governments, 2 different parts of government working together on standardization is typically not an easy. And then the other part is technology, where, for example, a technology like blockchain could enable something like this. We at CETA are experimenting and actually piloting something similar with ICAO related to the transfer of health information. through blockchain. We are also founding member of the Sovereign Foundation. So using the self-sovereign identity and enhancing it to include health information could also be a potential for the future, where the person or the passenger will be in control of their identity and who they share it with.
Excellent. The following question, which is coming from the floor as well, I will direct to the three panelists, Joan, Leslie Ann, and Koshi. And I want you to think about what's happening. As you know, identity programs are as good as the people that are in them, meaning if you have a small database of people who registered, you cannot target, you cannot deliver services. So the African authorities, are they running the risk that the old model of going out there and getting people into enrollment bureaus, is this model really dead, or is it really dying because it's too slow to respond to the need to bring in 100% of the population? So if you believe that's the case, what other ideas that the industry, especially you, your three organizations, can bring to the table to accelerate the onboarding process for any identity program? So let me start with Joan.
Hey, thank you, Joseph. Yeah, it's true. It's something that has to be worked on, and we believe on our side that it's important to leverage on the existing assets of the countries. Existing assets can be existing system like ID card database, voter database, where there are already identities. Some private sector database also include data that could be reused. Registration is whole registration. I mean, the complete registration of a whole population is not always mandatory, but it's required. Sometimes because of quality of data, it's important to have good quality of data for identification, for unicity check. And leverage also on the existing infrastructure. Think about what is already possible. You know, in Africa, they have always this mindset, try to find solution with what they have, and getting inspired the way they think in order to build solution that will be running on the existing things. And providing the technology is important, but we must not made in a rush. It must be built and think. And it must be done according to what exists already in the country. Not always think, I will remove everything, I will change everything. We had a very good example in Thales with a refurbishment of kits for election, where we divided nearly by 3 the cost of the renovation of these kits.
So basically you're saying we should not throw these processes and have a revolution. We can actually evolve to create that.
We cannot take risk on the quality of the service, on the security, on data protection, on everything which is important like that. But if we want to rush, we must accelerate, we must fast track, but we cannot take risks for the future. So we have to do a proper registration.
Well noted. Koshi and Leslie Ann, and then Lionel, I've seen you raise your hand with some other ideas. Are there new channels that you can think of to get this inclusion problem resolved? Koshi?
Yeah.
Koshi.
Before I give a specific solution to jump into a ready-made solution, I wanted to say one thing. One of the problem why we are sort of seeing all this delay is because the extent of attention that was given to this program and the importance given and the whole coordination had not been good enough to scale up to the requirement, where it is absolutely possible. If I just give you one example, when we in India decided that it is going to be a priority, we scaled up to have a registration of 1 million a day. So, and that's the kind of numbers we were able to raise purely by way of good processes being in place and a wide network of enrollment agencies. But now that, but I would like to add one more thing that we have very seriously saying will help. Is that, even in the coming days, there are a lot of service delivery points for the government services. If we can get them also as a part of this enrollment process, and if you create very clearly articulated and well tested out process for them. So as people come to the touch point for government service delivery, they can also be enrolled into the ID program. So it's a question of how you integrate both as a planned solution, and instead of just keeping them as two separate activities.
Okay, so you're basically advocating that there is a lot of points of contact with the population. We should bring them in, leverage them, even though maybe that's not their original focus. We no longer have the siloed setup, because you do this here, you do this there. Maybe we can create a new model where once you go somewhere, it's a unique experience. You're able to enroll, you're able to get your paperwork, leverage all the points of every service delivery that governments have. Right. Leslie Ann, can you add to that? What do you see another way to get the governments to achieve total inclusion of their ID systems? Leslie Ann, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Just don't move too much, because
so I'm really resonating with the ideas I'm hearing. We launched M-Pesa in 2005 with no customers. We had millions quickly. Within 6 months, we had 2 million. That's because of our distribution model and the way that we had a business model that incentivized it to work as well. So it's not just about the technology, it's also about the service delivery. We had to think about how that would work in reality. We used a lot of patterns from how the airtime distribution model works in the mobile money world, in the airtime world. We brought a lot of ideas across in terms of the way that airtime distribution is already in place and was working. So I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned from the way that companies collaborate to get enrollment verifications done. You've got to think about the business model as well and the service design, because the reality is those are not your employees. So you've got to think about the realities of what's in it for them. And also the fact that if they can make more money, they will make more money. You're not in control. So what are your fraud systems? How are you looking for good and bad? Because you will have good registrations and bad registrations. You can plan for that, and you can design for that, and you can improve training, and you can also remove bad actors, just like the way that mobile money agents work today across Africa.
Okay, excellent. Lionel, do you want to tap into this? You said you had something to add.
Yes. What we've seen in the market recently is some telcos starting to put as part of the KYC process the need of having a biometric KYC. Yeah. And this is fantastic, because everyone must have a SIM card, and everyone is going to get a SIM card somehow. So by just putting that in the regulation, you need a biometric KYC. All the telcos are putting in place. And if I give the example of Tanzania, for example, they had to do it in less than 6 months. And all the 3 major telcos, Vodacom, Airtel, and Tigo, created a sort of an alliance to do the biometric registration. And so you have, in a country, a global biometric registration. So it's done by telcos. And this is, I think, a good example of what country could do. And then you just need to, as we said, to share the data.
Okay.
Exactly that. And I think there's a public-private partnership there and a consortium play of co-petition that I think that was possible quickly in Tanzania because they were already in a mobile money consortium for interoperability purposes. And we need to see more of this. Exactly.
Exactly.
Excellent. I want Shashi to close this topic with one question I have. Shashi, what does Mastercard think about self-enrollment? I mean, basically people getting on a mobile app, enrolling themselves or submitting data, submitting any other, selfie, fingerprint photograph of your fingers. Do you think this is a promising direction?
Well, I would just say that, the underlying principle of some of these things is what we need to look at before we sense the direction. So there are lots of models of identity enrollment possible. I think the direction we see ourselves going is one that preserves the consumer's right to access that data, the consumer's right to privacy, and gives consumer control over that data, right? So as Mastercard, I think those are the principles that we firmly believe in, and those are the principles we hold dear. In that context, we do respect that governments are going to adopt that various models. We do respect the fact that there are different identity models that are possible. We have chosen also to respond directly to your question, the way in which we have tackled our ID service, for example, which we launched a couple of months ago, was to enable consumers the ability to have control of their ID and data services, and therefore that self-enrollment aspect became a key component of that to enable access to various kinds of services. We are optimistic about that direction because we feel that that's what gives the consumer the most control, and that's where we continue to kind of make our investments. But we do also believe in the concept of interoperability. So the ability for that consumer to also work within the confines of a government mandated ID system, which is more foundational, is also critical. We cannot ignore that. So it's that fine balance. But as a private sector entity, I would say that we would continue to work within that model of consumer centricity.
At the moment, there is a lot of interest by African governments to put in place what would be called a temporary digital identity, which can be validated in 6 months or 3 months and made into an official government identity. You can do enrollment like you do, perhaps even on a commercial platform, and let that be integrated with the foundational system of the country.
That's correct.
I think there is a strong interest. I would cite the World Bank's second mission billion, which is basically focusing on trying to motivate and incentivize innovation in that area. Okay, I want to move on. There's a pointed question. It says question for Lionel. What is the one technology or solution that governments are clamoring for that they would like to be deployed quickly to help them open their markets? So one solution they're clamoring for.
Oh, this is a tough question. I need to pick up one. No, I would say that what they're dreaming is a solution that can be sent on any mobile phone. It's a mobile technology. I think we all understand that today, the way you go digital in Africa is via the mobile. So the one technology I see is seeking by government now is how they could get access to their customer and to piggyback on one ID they already have. And in some country, it's a social security card. In some other country, it's a student card. In some other country, so they want to piggyback of what already exists through the mobile technology to be able to get access to that customer. And that's what we're seeing very concretely on the market now.
Okay, I want to take another question, and that's for Koshi. Koshi, the question to you is, what is the role of central and local government in your work on the ground when you're dealing with the current situation? How important are standards to your work?
See, in a pandemic kind of situation, one of the biggest challenges is how the things are organized at the bottom layer, which is to be handled by the local government. And very often they need very standardized procedure and ready for them so that they can take immediate response. Because the kind of people who are there on the field are not so educated or not so aware of what is happening. So they need to have simple solutions, simple access, simple devices, and very clear processes ready for them to take immediate action, whether it is about planning for immediate food delivery, or whether it is planning for immediate other assistance, or even bed management.
Excellent. Another question I'm gonna have to Jom, Harm, and Imad, because they each representing a different sector, and it comes from someone in Bangladesh, and he's deputy secretary of the government, and basically saying that we are inundated pretty much with lots and lots of solutions and people coming in and telling us this is going to solve this problem, this is going to solve that problem, and they don't have access to validating what is a solution that works, and also certification. How do we see the role of perhaps industry associations as well as independent bodies in this process. So maybe, John, you can start in that regard.
Yes, thank you for the question. So yes, so we are working on interoperability, and we believe this is the future and the direction we have to go. And interoperability is requiring a lot of collaboration between the stakeholders. It's important to have all the players around agreeing and working in the same direction. On our side, in the SIA, we are building the OSIA. We are more than 20 companies working together on a weekly basis to define this interoperability and to demonstrate, hopefully, when the COVID period will be passed. And we are working also on the way we should demonstrate that it works, working on certification scheme. The goal being to find a solution that will be finally not leaving any company behind, so being compatible with OSIA. Does not require to be a member of OSIA, and we would like also the certification to be the less costly as possible. And this is where we work on a business model to reach that objective.
Okay. Actually, Harm?
Yes, and thank you for this great and timely question. And I already mentioned some standards, initiatives, and interoperability areas that I focus on. Latest is the COVID-19 traceability and the contact tracing one. So what I believe is we have been so much focused on a country-by-country digital identities ecosystem. And we have tried in Europe with EIDAS, and we have tried with some other initiatives, cross-country initiatives, but it has been slow, and now we don't have that time and luxury. So what I'm trying to ask, and also to this panel, because our organizations together is a strong coalition of the willing, if we like to, is how can we work together to create an open ecosystem? An open ecosystem with a trust framework and a trust mark that can be transparent and verified, and governance can be just explained, and which organizations are behind, is it public, private sector, who drives it, but also open for any identity provider, any data provider or service provider to provide their services, publish their services, be commercial about it if it needs to, or if it's a public service that's free of charge, it's also very good to have in that platform. So an open ecosystem with a trust framework. And we already started this a couple of times with Open Identity Exchange and Open ID Foundation. I've seen good examples of a global approach with open banking now. We can leverage on those same principles, on those same standards and same frameworks when we try to do it on digital identity for all.
Okay, excellent. Ahmad, I'll give you the option to answer this question or answer one that's very specific to the airline.
Okay, answer one that is very specific to the airline.
Excellent, excellent choice. So I'm opening the bag. So the question is, basically, you said that social distancing is here to stay. And however, airports, planes, and in generally, all infrastructures have not been designed for accommodating social distancing, especially in the travel process. So what do you think is going to be required? Is this sort of a bandage approach, or do you think a redesign of the travel process is underway?
Thank you. That's a very good question, actually. I was looking at it while I was looking at some of the questions. So first of all, I apologize. I didn't mean it's here to stay forever. It's here to stay for the next maybe 3 years or so. We're hoping after that, social distancing will go away. But if you want the short to medium time frame, it's here to stay. It's a redesign of the travel process, as Joseph, you mentioned at the end. So first of all, if you look at if we do as much as possible of our travel processing before we get to the airport, then the amount of time we have to spend in the airport and our path in the airport will be in a way a little bit more predicted than if everyone comes and does everything and lines up and so on. There's also technology around predictive analytics that could be applied. So, for example, the use of digital twins. Before COVID, we started deploying that technology to optimize resources in airports and so on, but it can very much use today for the purpose of social distancing. So it's a combination. If you've been to an airport, I asked the person who asked the question, if you have been to an airport like me recently, it looks much different than when the last time you traveled. And the next time you travel, your experience in the airport will look much different. So you will see how social distancing is actually applied in practice.
Actually, I'm hoping that we can recruit you as a volunteer to examine our social distancing plans that we're submitting to the government in Morocco for the reopening of our ID4Africa annual meeting. We've created an entire workflow and a plan to make sure that there will be exactly the same measures that you're going to be implementing in the airport. We're assuming that we know some of them. Maybe you can help us understand those.
Happy to do that, Joseph, and apply some of the good minds we have in CETA around that.
Excellent, excellent. We thank you. I want to ask the panel to close on a very rapid question, which will be 2 words. I want you to tell me, as a representative of your industry, what's the one thing you want from the government and the one thing you want from the development agencies that will basically make your mission and your ability to help the world reopen its economies and reopen the skies more successful. And I will start with Shashi. Just what do you need? One thing from the government, one thing from the development agencies. If you don't need anything, just say, get out of it.
No, I wouldn't say that. I think, I think broadly, what we've been finding and which has been accelerated because of the emergency, I would say I would just club the requirements into one piece, which is more public-private partnerships. I think that is, yes, just that one word. I think that in effect can help scale social impact and impact at large. As a private sector entity, we are committed to that. And I think we just need that outreach. That's it.
This is a great way of summing it up. More public and private partnership. And we need to tell the development agencies that they need to support those partnerships. Okay, so excellent. I want to go to John. John, what do you need from government? What do you need from development agencies?
Okay, so I think I agree with Shashi. We want to have more collaboration with the private sector. So having a global cooperation on the definition of what has to be an ID system, count with the private sector to accelerate. We want to accelerate. There are things in place. They need to be involved on that. And another one that I would like to ask to the development agency is also to work on the guideline for protection of person digital identity. What are the rules? What are the best practice for that?
Okay, let's keep going. Leslie Ann?
Totally resonate with what we're saying. I think I need to go further and say what happens on day 2 of the partnership, and let's really think about what it means beyond being in a room talking. And I think we also need to think about how do we educate people in the market about this new thing. People don't know about biometrics.
We lost
right there. Me again.
we lost you. Again,
I'm so sorry.
You made an important point. Day 2 of the partnerships, not just public-private.
And also we need to educate people because there are going to be new fraud patterns, and we need to think about how do we collaboratively educate people on the ground on what this identity thing is coming together. We need to work together on this.
Okay, Lionel.
Yeah, if I have one thing to ask the government is please decide quicker. Please make up your mind now. I mean, we don't have time to waste. And the solution is in a public-private sector collaboration always. And if I have one thing to say to the agency, to the development agency, is just don't speak only to the public sector. You need to support public-private sector and need to talk to both private and public sector together.
Very well said. Okay, Harm.
Yes, so I continue on this public-private partnership focus, but also create the right funding to start quickly, because otherwise we will be thinking about it forever. We need to act now. So how can we speed up decisions and funding in projects like Open Gates, and how can we open the gates again?
Okay, thank you, Ahmad.
Okay, for governments, I would say that, and I would echo what IATA and ACI said in their paper, is that any measures related to COVID-19 should be limited in time, so it shouldn't be forever, as we mentioned on social distancing, should be evaluated continuously, should be less disruptive to the industry as much as possible, but most importantly, should be scientifically or based on science, not on fear or on what everyone else is doing. If a measure doesn't add value, let's not do it. And for both the government and development agency is to work together with airlines and with providers like ourselves to enable a trusted framework for data exchange for identity.
Okay, Koshi, close us, please.
Hi, while I agree with public and private participation, but I would like to give a different twist to it, because the private sector will want to come where there is business opportunities, but they can build only on strong foundations, strong protocols, strong standards, and these are public goods. So the government has to focus on what are the essential foundational public goods on which the private sector can build. Otherwise, they will never be able to take off. And that is exactly a complementary role the developmental agencies will also have to provide, both in terms of funding and know-how in building such foundational system on which the next sector interface can be built, especially in the area of health and education.
Okay, so I heard a lot of public-private partnerships we want. We want basically quick decision-making on the part of the governments. We don't have time to lose. We need the right funding to make sure this thing is gonna get started. And we want them to also promote public goods that could be leveraged and utilized by the industry instead of having to worry about the layers of trying to acquire this. We are facing a catastrophe around the world. We're facing a challenge that concerns us all as humans, and therefore the more we can share public goods, if I interpreted what you said correctly, then it's something that governments and development agencies should be encouraging. Is that what you meant? I think, Koshi, we lost you.
No, that's exactly what we are talking about.
Okay, perfect.
And
okay.
Joseph, call for collaboration, big collaboration between them. Step back from competition, call for collaboration.
Yes, collaboration so we can beat this pandemic and bring the world back, reopening its economies and reopening its skies, and so that ID4Africa can be held in person once more again, so we can see you together.
We're all for it.
So anyway, I want to thank you all. We could continue this discussion, but we are now ready to move to the next session. I will thank the panelists for wonderful insights. It's been a really interesting conversation. We were able to take some questions from the floor, but as you can see, it's very hard to take very, very specific questions. It's a discussion. So I hope the attendees found it useful. Now we're going to go very, very concretely about touchless, contactless, and how do we build and rebuild this experience. So I'll ask the moderators, the ID4Africa team to bring down the current panelists and bring up the other team. Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay, as we prepare the next panel, this panel is very different. So we're now doing something completely different than what we've done in the first one. Here, we're going to give the industry the opportunity to do a series of presentations, rapid-fire presentations, specifically addressing the topic of contactless. If we say contactless, it's not just about contactless biometrics. It's also about platforms such as mobile that can be leveraged to help people move away from the use of public use or shared terminals, because you've got a terminal in your pocket, you've got a mobile, even if you touch it, it's still your personal property, and you will have a higher level of certainty and your safety. So we've got a lineup consisting of IDEMIA, Iris ID, ZK Teco, Integrated Biometrics, and HID Global. Do I see all of the panelists there? Martin, are you able to turn on your video, please? Okay, Martin's video is stuck. So what we will do is we will continue with this session and we'll bring him in. What I had in mind, I had contactless fingerprints, I had iris, and then I had face. And then the question whether we really with fingerprints with the contact. There are some ideas that Integrated Biometrics, very interesting stuff. And then HID will come in with the perspective on mobile. So I will start with IDEMIA. So we will go from this panel view to a view where IDEMIA shares their screen. We've never done this really smoothly, so please bear with us. If we get any glitches, it will be growing pains. So I asked the ID4Africa support team to bring in IDEMIA's presentation and have IDEMIA share their screen. Okay, so now, Nicola, are you in control of the screen?
Hi, yes, I am. Do you see my screen?
Yes, we see your screen. Please go ahead. Give your presentation.
Okay, hi everybody. So it's a pleasure for me to join this presentation. So I'm Nicholas Reffen. I'm VP Marketing for the biometric devices of IDEMIA. I guess most of you know who's IDEMIA. We are in the business of identity. We've been in the business of identity for the past maybe 40 years and biometrics for the past 25 years. Today, I'm presenting Morph Compact, which we position as the unique contactless fingerprint terminal, which is of much interest at the moment. I would say, unfortunately, because it's in the scope of this COVID-19 situation. But we launched that 4 years ago. So it was not meant for COVID-19, obviously. It was meant for more convenience, and it happens to be more hygienic as well. So Morph Compact, you see it here. It's a device that reads 4 fingerprints in less than 1 second through a fully touchless gesture of the hand, through a wave of the hand. This is why we have the name Morph Compact. Better than speaking a lot, I will try to launch the small video to let you see how it works. If I manage to get back to my previous slide. Yes. It doesn't seem to be able to play videos in Zoom. So you see the space here. Basically, you wave the hand through a very simple head movement in the terminal. You don't touch any piece of the sensor. It's really a natural gesture from left to right or right to left with the right hand or left hand. At no moment your fingerprints are left on the sensor, since you don't touch it. So it's a big difference with some other terminals, where you have to apply and maintain maybe 1 finger or 4 fingers, apply them touching the sensor. So here it's fully contactless, and obviously it's more hygienic and quicker. On this slide, you were supposed to see 3 different small videos. They are all available on YouTube, so you can have the replay afterwards. Unfortunately, my effect is fully a failure here. I apologize for that. The first one on the left, it's to highlight it's really fast. We have plenty of partners reselling our products, and one of them was creative enough to try to see how many verification it could have in 1 minute. So you would see this device being tested during 60 seconds. And he managed to get 40 hand passes and successful verification. So remember, each time you pass the hand, we capture 4 images of the 4 fingerprints, despite the fact that you just do a less than 1 second gesture. So it's very quick and it's very accurate. The 2 other pictures show that we also designed that so that it works with all finger conditions: dry, wet, dirty, damaged fingers, which is what we find in real life, I would say, because our terminals are used by a variety of verticals. And even in offices, you find people with absolutely damaged fingers and fingerprints, people who also do some home gardening, but we also sell in industry and in various countries where we also sell to entities using farmers or in the mining industry. And obviously those people have sometimes in factories dirty fingers or damaged fingers. And so we made sure that the algorithm that we developed for this product are strong and powerful enough to have the same behavior and accuracy and speed, whatever the conditions of the fingers. This is very important, especially as we move to the ID applications. Mm-hmm. In terms of applications, it serves a very wide variety of use cases, indoor and outdoor. On the left, you see the traditional access control in offices, so mounted on a wall. It can also be mounted on the speed gates in the lobby, in the entrance of the company, for example, as a much powerful alternative to the good old access badge. In the middle, you see what would be a more industrial setup with this kind of turnstiles, man traps, which can also be outdoor because the device is also meant for outdoor use in the sun, in the rain, strong light or snow. And on the right is it's a nice application as well in parking. So you just have to stop the car in front of the device and wave the hand through the window and in the terminal, and then it opens. So those are, let's say, corporate use cases, but we see more ID use cases feasible as well around the typical use cases that you discuss in ID4Africa, around enrollment. So more use cases which are facilitated by our ID entity within IDEMIA. I represent more the corporate entity, but this, as you see, this device is becoming more or less multifaceted. It can be useful for enrollment or population census, for financial inclusion. You see it one picture here where it's connected to a checkout, almost as a biometric pin pad. So for programs like subsidized food programs or things like that, it could be interesting to use it that way. And last interesting point is the fact that if you read the last NIST evaluation, contactless to contact, Morph was seen as a credible option to match and verify against legacy fingerprint databases. So usually databases that were created with contact fingerprints, and you would do then a contactless verification hitting those existing contact databases, and it gives very satisfactory levels. If you scan the QR code here, you get directly to the news we published last Monday about this NIST evaluation. Okay. So in a nutshell, accuracy, speed, contactless, so hygienic, you don't touch anything, and it's field proven. It's been on the field for the past 4 years, and it's constantly improved. Okay. So I want to ask if there are any questions specific to this particular product for IDEMIA. Anybody in the audience wants to ask a specific question while we give people a chance to ask? I want to ask you, Nicola,
you spoke about the NIST work on authentication. Could you share any results on the effectiveness of this platform and this capture process for deduplication? Because a lot of countries are now saying authentication is not our problem. Our problem is getting people into the database in a unique way. So what do you say to that, Nicholas?
Well, it's a reading that we do out of this NIST evaluation that was carried out some times ago, and the objective, one of the objectives of this study was effectively to see how contactless fingerprint readers behave today in comparison to contact fingerprints, and precisely to see how they could be introduced and leverage existing legacy contact fingerprints, and so. Among the various other devices tested, our Morph technology stood out. Your point is correct. We see people having that need, so it's good that more or less that evaluation comes at that moment where we can introduce this device for this kind of applications. Because as I said initially, that was positioned for access control in corporate environment, and let's say with the NIST stamp, so to say, we now see more openings in government programs with legacy databases. We also see some clients now considering using it for acquisition and verification at the same time on fully contactless. So it would not be hitting an existing legacy contact fingerprint database, but they would be creating their own database, contactless from the beginning, and then contactless verification in a kind of closed loop, if I can speak like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are quite a few questions that are coming in. I want you to hit them very quickly. Even some of them may not be relevant, but I'm going to mention them out of respect for the people who are asking. They're asking, what is the false positive rate and the false negative rate? I guess this is an algorithmic question. Can you say anything about that?
No, because we never communicate about that. It covers many parameters and many right. conditions. So and depending on the use case, depending on the base you're considering, obviously it's more or less a calculation that you have to make every time, and the fine tuning as well.
Understand. Does your device basically output ISO images or proprietary only? I mean, what can I get if I bought this device? Will I get the images, or will I get minutia or whatever other representation proprietary to you?
No, it's minutia.
It is. You will export an image, or will you export out of the device? Does the device output an image? If I'm an system integrator and I want to integrate this device, what do I get out as the output of the device?
We have the two options.
Two options. Okay.
Yes, so depending on what you have behind.
And I assume there is no match on the device itself. You match on the server.
Two options as well. You can match on the device itself or match on the server.
Right. Again,
the device would be up to 100,000 users.
Up to 100,000 users. Okay.
Quite
then,
significant.
Another question that just came in, and this will be the last question, so I'll release you. Is it minutia and IDEMIA format or ANSI format?
I would not be the right technical person for that. Sorry.
Okay, understood. Okay, I apologize for all the other questions that we could not get to because the time is up. Nicholas, thank you for this.
Thank you very much.
And I'd like to move on now to Mohammed Murad from Iris ID. So just a few seconds to reorganize the screen.
Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay. What about my screen?
We can see your screen.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Attic. And it's great to be here. We would like to be in person, but unfortunate situations, we need to be virtual. Anyway, so today's presentation, we would concentrate more on where we are seeing the growth for iris recognition, some of the customers, a few cases, and part of innovations that we are making to make technology accessible on a worldwide basis. So with that, I'll begin with the contactless technology. Where we're seeing growth for our technology, and we have seen it for years, Iris ID has been providing our solutions since 2002 globally. Some of our larger enterprise customers consist of Googles and Apples and some large financial sector organizations using our technology to provide access control and protection of their property and granting access to their employees, to their buildings, etc. But where we are also seeing a great growth and demand in the government sector is in delivery of social services, delivery of healthcare. We have several programs for pension distribution globally, and you can see some of the flags down below in my presentation that these countries are using iris recognition technology today for some of these applications. Some are also using for financial transactions that are linked to pension distributions as well. We're seeing some of this stuff in the past and currently for school registrations. The other parts that we have deployed solutions and we're starting to see a greater demand is tracking of civil servant time and attendance and enterprise time and attendance. And we have some great examples for those time and attendance application. For example, in Africa, one of the largest conglomerate called Dangote is using our technology across all their cement plants across Africa for about 35 to 40,000 employees to manage their time integrated with their enterprise resource management application. In the schools, we are also seeing universities in the United States and a few other countries that they're requiring their students to access the cafeteria and food services with using contactless iris recognition. So the demand is increasing on multiple type of applications. The biggest thing that we see is, as an industry, iris recognition, fingerprint, and face, we all need to work together and provide a cohesive solution that countries and agencies can fall back to one or the other biometrics, because no biometric is going to work in all scenarios. So one of the applications that I see the iris recognition serves really well is in the younger population. And as we see some of these developing countries have the youngest population, we feel that most organizations or national ID programs should be including, some are including that iris recognition is one of the modality, so they can lead and have one-time ID available for their population. And as we know, more research needs to be done, but the concept is the iris is pretty stable throughout the age. And there are some NIST studies. I don't have them referenced here, but if somebody's interested, I'll be able to point them on the NIST website privately, so they can go and review them, what NIST has said and have done on the aging factor of iris recognition. As you can see in some of these graphics where children are being enrolled, most of these images are from India, and Iris ID was we're very proud we've been part of the HAR program from the beginning of the program in 2010. Then we have provided our technology for voter registration in Somaliland, in northeastern Africa. Has been very successfully enrolled about 1.2 million people. We provide technologies that can be used as a totally contactless from a distance of 35 centimeters all the way up to 1.2 meters, or they can use it in as a binocular. So there's only one device where an individual, while is using it, need to put on their face, but all the other devices and technologies we offer are contactless. This was a very interesting program, was very successful. It is continuing slowly to emerge into maybe at some point for casting a vote. Then we have been involved in some NGOs in Africa where we're providing the vaccination record keeping for children, that Phase ID program done under the Yankofa project, where they were able to enroll children to enroll them because they did not have any documentation to make sure that the proper vaccination was provided to each individual. So it worked extremely well with the younger children and adults in the same way. It is one of the technologies that can provide you one-to-many authentication without the presence of a token or a card. All depends on the enrollment is very much relies on the quality of the enrollment, and our devices offer a complete ISO protection for the image. All devices produce images that are ISO compliant.
Mohammed, can you wrap up, please?
Sure. Then from the innovation side, we have been developing technologies where I'm going to have a short video. This solution can be mounted on a gate. It is very flexible. The individual can be moving. They can be sitting down. They can be very tall, over 200 centimeters. And the distance that it covers is 1.2 meters. It is a fusion of facial recognition and iris recognition. The other part of innovation that we are working on is designing programs to provide technology as pay-per-use, so they don't need to have a complete investment on the technology from day one, and make the system very affordable. We are also concentrating, you will see here towards the third and the fourth quarter, we are developing OEM modules so we can bring other partners who are building tablets and other mobile devices, so iris recognition can be part of those solutions.
Right. Mohammed,
yep.
Your time's up. So just one quick question for you. Would you consider leasing programs for governments? There's a question from the audience.
Absolutely, and that is part of the discussions we are having with some institutions, where we can do some leasing programs or build and transfer programs, etc.
Okay, no problem. Please, all questions for Mohammed, you can connect with him directly and ask him. We've run out of time for his portion. So I want to continue. Martin, can you please step up? Mohammed, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Martin, can you please step up, take control of the screen and present your presentation?
Thank you. Yes, so thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm Martin, Regional Manager of African Market at Zikateco. We will be quickly looking at the contactless innovation here at Zikateco. We will look at the facial recognition and the palm recognition developed by Zikateco. So let me give a quick introduction of the company. First, we actually do in access control, security inspection, time attendance, and we provide a safe management solution of people, vehicle, and things. We do in big data operation, artificial intelligence powered software such as ZK biosecurity, biotime, and the cloud attendance solution. We provide the trusted identity authentication, biometrics, and the card application and cloud platform. We actually we are present in Africa through our research and development center in Nigeria. Our branch office is in Egypt, South Africa, Morocco, Kenya, and Nigeria. So our core biometrics technologies are fingerprint recognition, the 3-in-1 palm recognition, and the facial recognition. We have actually developed two devices to actually address the question or the challenges of the COVID-19. Here are the two devices, the ProFace XTI and the ProFace STD, which are enabled of detecting temperature and also mask. And they actually use the facial recognition and the palm recognition for identification. You can see that the temperature detection use 1,024 points of measurement for the temperature detection, and for the TI, it used among 10,800 measurement points. So we quickly move to the technology. We have the visible light, which is the facial recognition, equipped with the near infrared. The visible light actually does not need a specific design for the picture enrollment. We just the help of our mobile phone, we can just take a selfie and then enroll it in the system. We don't need a specific devices, and the recognition distance is up to 3 meters. And the visible light is actually enabled to actively collect face images and perform marking in a distance of 3 meters. So we mostly put together the visible light and the near-infrared technology to increase the live detection. The visible light basically checks the face point for the faster accurate result and the long distance, but the near-infrared detect whether the image contains any human faces through CNN and check whether the person is a real person or is a fake person or is a picture. Yeah. So for the face process, the algorithm use multi-dimensional features with face elements acquired up to 6 images. So the algorithm will input 6 images in the system in order to identify the person, no matter the angle. We quickly move to the palm recognition. Actually, since 2016, ZKTeco actually came up with the first palm recognition technology. And 3 years later, the technology has been improved with the by the help of the technological bloom of the computer vision. We actually incorporate 3 in 1. We have the palm recognition, the palm print recognition, and then the palm vein recognition. So the steps consist, the first step consists in identifying whether the object is a palm. Then the second step, we recognize the palm print through the unique feature points. And then the third step will consist in using the infrared light to get the features point of the palm vein. We have to emphasize on the fact that the algorithm can, the algorithm has an angle of tolerance of 60 degrees and has 50 centimeters of recognition distance with a recognition speed of 0.35 second. And I believe that this contactless solution could be an effective alternative way for fingerprint verification. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Martin, you did not emphasize the fact that your technology can handle face masks, even occlusion. There was a question in the audience on that. Could you say something about face masks?
Oh, yeah, exactly. As I showed in the presentation, we can notice that we have the sensor and the chip that can get the facial recognition. But even though the person is wearing a mask, the chip and the sensor can get the face recognition of the person and detect if the person have the mask. This solution is actually put in place to help companies to resume work. For instance, some companies maybe will require the employees to have the mask before accessing the company. So okay, this device will actually help to notice that the person has a mask or not.
Okay, because that's a requirement, and then it measures their temperature at the same time, and recognizes who they are. Actually, for people who said that the presentation is blurry, please send us your email address and we will share with you Martin's presentation. I see people asking for it because it's kind of blurry. So just send to Shauna an email saying, please share Martin's presentation. We'll be happy to do that, assuming Martin, you would allow us to do that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, no problem. Okay, I want to keep moving on. Dave from Integrated Biometrics.
Good morning. Okay, you got me, Doctor?
Yes, you're there.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Attic, friends and colleagues, thank you so much for allowing me this time to present. In the next 5 minutes, I'll shed light on a few innovations to slow or eliminate the transfer of pathogens during identity enrollment and verification. Now, we can all agree that solving the global identity problem Dr. Attic and participants in ID4Africa have been working on for years is of the utmost importance. And identity validation is greater now during these times of crisis than any other. There are more demands on social services, we've got greater financial needs, and there's a heightened requirement for fast, accurate identification at our borders. Integrated Biometrics has not taken a knee-jerk reaction to COVID-19 or any other pathogen. Our research and development department has been investigating solutions to these types of issues for years. IB develops one thing: fingerprint capture devices. Understanding their benefits and limitations is our job.
David, can you reshare your screen? Because we lost your screen.
I want you to see me, doctor.
Okay. We see you even when you share your screen.
All right. Contactless verification for non-critical, non-certified markets is an admirable idea. The process is convenient and there's nothing to touch. To meet the demand, IB is preparing an announcement on our contactless fingerprint technology solution. However, we do not see contactless as a replacement for enrollment in large, critical databases for years to come. We recognize there are some inherent problems with contactless fingerprint imaging. Fingers are flat. They are curved until they are flattened on a hard surface. So cameras used in contactless applications must focus across a three-dimensional curved finger to capture the valleys and ridges. If you've ever tried to capture your own fingerprints with a mobile phone, you know it's not a user-friendly process. And remember, your IAFIS databases are populated with two-dimensional flat prints. To date, there are no contactless devices Appendix F certified for enrollment. So far, we've not found a way to make three-dimensional objects two-dimensional without manipulation. MITRE, NIST, and other certifying organizations require unmanipulated imagery. Now, COVID-19 has brought contactless devices to everyone's attention. However, tactile fingerprint devices, those you touch, will continue to lead the market for years to come. Updating these devices to meet the world's current identity needs is the real challenge, which is why our research and development team is working to solve the challenge of touch for the thousands of devices you've already made an investment in. Now, the industry is aware that IB's tactical fingerprint technology is different. Instead of a glass surface, we employ an electroluminescent film. So I'm going to share this. This film provides all of the advantages we've presented to the market over the years. It works in direct sunlight with dry fingers and low power consumption. What you might not realize is this film technology provides additional advantages that we've never before shared. The first is to impregnate within the film antimicrobial coatings that will literally make the surface of our devices deadly to viruses. Antimicrobial coatings have been in use on surfaces within the medical field for years. It's not magic. The magic is made at IB Labs, where the technology is used to both kill pathogens on the surface and produce perfect fingerprint images. The second solution is to employ our core electroluminescent technology, using fingers or another surface as a conductor of electricity to actually clean the device during or after each use. Studies have shown that electricity and silver ion particles are deadly to pathogens like COVID-19. And a third solution in development employs another technology created for the medical industry, adapting the use of UV lighting to kill viruses. Now, it may seem trivial, but the Center for Disease Control states that clean hands are the #1 best way to avoid pathogens. It's the easiest, least expensive solution available to most of the world's population. Wash your hands or use antibacterial products after touching any surface, like a doorknob, like a handrail, like a tabletop, like a fingerprint sensor. At IB, our team is working around the clock, making our platen surfaces safe for fingers, but deadly to pathogens. In this short time, I've offered 5 different ideas to address the COVID problem: contactless, antimicrobial coatings, electrified silver ion particles, UV lighting, and cleaning your hands. All right, so why am I telling this group, including my competitors, about these innovations? Because IB believes that the right approach can be applied across the board on all fingerprint scanners. So the visionaries like Dr. Attic can get back to doing and fixing the real problem, providing identity to those without it. I want to thank everybody for sharing this time with me and giving me this chance to present.
Thank you, David. Anybody with questions would like to ask David? We are open to questions. In the meantime, David, talk about sort of timelines. Obviously, this is cutting edge innovations. It's happening as we speak in the lab. What is your timeline in terms of introducing products, and how would you certify those products? For example, when you talk about the antimicrobial coating and then kills pathogens, are there bodies that certify that this device does achieve these what levels?
There are ISO groups that do that. I don't have the number right in front of me, but yes, especially for antimicrobial. And Doctor, my engineering team panics every time I provide a date. And so let's just say that despite of COVID-19, Integrated Biometrics has got a lot to announce in the remainder of 2020. So lots going on and coming up.
That's great. So we will look forward. We'll stay tuned. We look forward to hearing from you and your announcements. And thank you for your continued support of the movement. Okay, thank you. Now we go to Jean-Baptiste from HID Global.
Hi everyone, this is Jean-Baptiste here speaking. I'm going to try to share my screen right away and be ready to start. You should see my screen, you should hear me. Please confirm, Attic.
Yes, we do.
All right, so my point here is to make a very simple, pragmatic, and easy presentation of our actual experience around mobile identity and how this can be very efficient in the time of COVID. Mobile identity very simply goes by get it, use it. So the first point is for government to be able to provide a mean of identification to their citizen, and mobile identity is a good option. To provide a mobile identity to a citizen, first you need to get your citizen to have the capacity to make an application, make a request to get it, and from home. What you want to avoid is to create mass gathering by having people to come to your government office to be able to make a request for an identity document. When they do it from home, there is better protection of their health. The way we see it, and if we make comparison between mobile and physical identity, you need for mobile identity to provide three type of information. The first is why you are eligible to this identity document provided by your government. Just a reference to a record, the necessary paperwork that are requested by policy in your country. The second one is to demonstrate that it's you, so mostly around biometrics. And that goes for physical and mobile identity. Now there is something extra for mobile identity that is to provide information related to your device, because this identity will not be on a physical carrier provided by your government. It will be directly on your own device, your mobile phone. So with the capacity to collect remotely these three types of information from the phone, the government can then enable its citizen to make such a request. This is my record. This is who I am in this government database. This is the proof that it's me, and you have a camera. There is also capacity to snap fingers with a camera, so to get an additional biometrics on top of the face. You can have the fingers, and then you just provide information about your device so that the government can establish the level of security they can have by putting the mobile identity on that specific device. So then that mobile identity will end up on the right phone, and you have established the first step, that is get it. Now you have it. Additionally to the convenience and preventing from COVID situation, we still establish with mobile identity a very high security. All the data are signed with a good old mechanism that we have for the last 15 years in electronic identity. The issuer prepares the data, signs those data with a PKI mechanism. On top of being able to provide remotely the issuance, there is a capacity to keep this data always up to date. You change your address, you change any other information that is related to you. You do not need to go to the government place to get your document changed and get additional chance of being in a mass gathering area. All of that can happen to you remotely, directly from your home. Now let's go to the second step, the use it. What matters now that as a citizen, you have your mobile identity on your phone is your capacity to demonstrate who you are when you need to demonstrate it. On the screen, we see someone who has been obviously stopped in his car, probably by a law enforcement officer, but there could be other opportunity in the streets, in places where you need to demonstrate your identity. And in that case, what you want to avoid is that your piece of plastic that is, or polycarbonate or any other material that you have for your identity document, that you need to pass that document to someone else who will put their hand into it and then pass it back to you. That's exactly the kind of things that we need to try to avoid as much as possible in those days. So the point being that now from your phone that you have in your hand, that's only yours, you'll be able to pass the data to the device of this other person in front of you. And you need to do that without exchanging the devices. And that's made possible with mobile identity by the use of BLE. BLE is a technology that enables the establishment of a secure channel between two devices and then the sharing of this electronic information without any need to touch each other device. Mobile driving license established one way of making this engagement between the two devices, that is by sharing a barcode or sharing an NFC tap, which is great. There is no need to touch each other device when doing it, but it's quite hard to be at the 6 feet or 2 meters distance that is usually recommended between people in social distancing. BLE authorizes, when you do a full BLE implementation, which is an option that we have with GoID, enables you to be at 6 feet distance, 2 meters, and then make a secure connection between you and the person who needs to verify you, and then get that communication and the sharing of the data. The person in front of you will then be able to establish that this is your true identity with the PKI, and this is you by just looking at your face and comparing with the face that it has received. All of that is not a dream. All of that exists. We have implemented that in Argentina. It started not long ago, just before the pandemic in November, but it had already quite a good success and adoption. We have even noticed that very recently, when the government of Argentina had to stop the distribution of physical cards because they couldn't open their offices, there has been a surge of mobile identity, because that was the only way for the government of Argentina to provide a means of identification to their citizens. And the unique situation that we have in Argentina is that they have been brave enough, they have been ambitious enough to make the mobile identity with the same legal value as the physical identity. That was brave because it required them to make strong evaluation to make sure that it was possible, and it was. And the result of which is that now with mobile identity, they can really enable their citizen to have that identity, which would not be possible if it had no legal value. I'm gonna wrap up, because I think it's the end of my minutes. Just as a summary, you can get your mobile identity from home. You can share your mobile identity at an appropriate social distance. You can keep your data up to date, minimize your touch point, all of that in a context that has enough security to be called a government identity. And all of that is not a dream. All of that exists, has been implemented in Argentina, and is ready to be implemented in many other countries. With that, I'm going to stop and see if there is any question, Dr.
Yes, excellent. So we've got time to take one question or two. While they're thinking about this, Jean-Baptiste, I mean, there is for a while, we talked about the fact that the mobile ID was going to coexist with the physical ID. And now COVID comes, makes a surge in the mobile ID, and there's a trend, as you're saying, to move into a mobile ID. Do you think we're ever going to go back once the world sees the power of your mobile ID? Do you think there is going back?
Well, I'm a product manager for mobile identity, so I just would like to tell you, yes. The thing is, there are still people who won't have a device at all, a mobile device. There are still people who won't have a device that is compatible, very cheap device or old generation of device. There would still be a situation where we don't have the capacity to equip law enforcement or any other verification entity with the device that is necessary to read that mobile identity. So I still believe that there will be a transition. 100% mobile identity will not come overnight. We get pushed into it by COVID, and we have solution for that. We have demonstrated that in Argentina, but I do not see that the Argentina situation can be spread all over overnight. Unfortunately, not yet.
I understand. There's a question, which is an important question, I think, and it has to do with the interoperability. I mean, when you give somebody a card, there is a human interoperability. Anybody can read it, etc. Is this a proprietary solution, and that the readers and all the verification, I have to have HID, or can this be interoperable with other people's products in order to accomplish the verification of ID?
So there are currently two interoperable mobile identity on the way. One is related to driving license, right? It's the ISO 18013-5 standard that is due to be published in the very coming month, by the end of the year or early next year. That is one standard that we support as HID, and many other companies will also support the same. So that will provide interoperability, but that's meant only for driving license. Normally, there is another standard that starts to be groomed on the principles of ICAO and also with the support of ISO. That's the DTC, Digital Travel Credential. We are also part of it. We also support the latest version, but this document is a bit less mature. The publication is not expected for this year, nor next year, I believe more the year after. But there is a way for any country to start by implementing the latest draft, progress or along the way. There is something to keep in mind. A big difference between the physical identity and the mobile identity is that previously with physical identity, when a government launches a program, he has to think 10 years ahead, because when they launch something, the validity of the document is 10 years, and everything, the next generation will come much later on, and there is no way to make improvement in the meantime. All of that changes completely with mobile identity. You can launch something right away. When the standard evolves, you can then make updates, automatic updates to each of the citizens that already have your mobile identity, because you can keep the link, the connection with these devices to be able to push the new version. So there is no need to wait until DTC is published to start do something that is close enough to, the latest draft of DTC, and then along the way, make the updates.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we've reached our end here. Actually, while this is the end of the 3 webinar series, it's not the end of our online activities. I'd like to ask all of you who are attendees to be on the lookout. ID4Africa will be organizing some very innovative and new formats for engagements on very thematic topics, and we'll be coming back to you in July. We expect to hold them in July. So stay tuned. I think while we are apart, we stay together. As I said before, we are going to use this medium to continue the flow of information and to continue to connect the various entities who represent the stakeholders of this movement. So thank you all for your support, and thank you panelists and speakers for a wonderful series of presentations, and thank you attendees for having stuck with us for more than 2 hours on this fruitful webinar. So I say goodbye and stay safe, and we'll see you again very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.